Thank you. So I want to start with a question, a little bit of nice audience participation. So just raise your hand in this room if you run a business. Okay? Raise your hand if you work in sales. 1, 2, 3, 4 people, 4 or 5 people. Okay. And raise your hands finally if you believe communication is important. Fantastic. Okay, so we had about 60-70% of the room saying they're business owners, about 10% of the room saying they work in sales, and 100% of the room saying that they believe communication is important. So what I want to talk about today is the power of confident communication. But first of all, I want you to reconsider what the word communication means, or certainly broaden your horizon. Did you notice I asked you who here works in sales? And 3 or 4 people put their hand up. See, the truth is, we all work in sales. Because sales is communication. If you run a business, absolutely, because you need to get people to want to engage in your products and services. And if you work in a sales role, of course you do. But a lot of people forget this. We are always selling because we are always communicating. Whether it's on a date, whether it's trying to get your children to do something, whether it's trying to get some money, raising for charity, or whether it is selling a product or service, we are communicating, we are selling. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is I want people to see the 2 words as the same thing pretty much. So there I was, standing in front of my client. Tall, large gentleman, very powerful looking, told me to sit down. And there we started. And what was going in my head? Navin, don't mess this up. Do not mess this up. You haven't sold a single thing since you've been in this company. And I think people are beginning to doubt you. I started the conversation. I thought it started pretty well. And I was talking. My heart was pounding. I kept coming out with a lot of different things. We asked the odd question here and there, but generally it was me speaking, feeling like I was speaking very confidently. And then the client turned around and asked me something, which I didn't know the answer to. But inside, I was so keen to make sure I make an impression. So keen to make sure that I make the sale. So keen to make sure that the CEO, who was my client sitting in front of me, was impressed by me. So not knowing the answer wasn't good enough. And guess what my mind said? Make it up. So there I was, and I made the answer up. Now, have you ever been in a situation where you know that the other person knows you're lying? Right? That was one of those situations. I could see it in his face. It turned. Again, internal chatter. You idiot. Why didn't you just say you didn't know? You've really messed this up now. There's no way you're going to get the sale. Quickly, salvage it. More verbal diarrhea coming out. Speaking quicker. Telling him why he should buy. And eventually he just went, stop. I think we've had enough. I think we've heard enough. I've got another meeting coming up and I don't think we're going to be going ahead, but thank you for your time. And I trudged off. I don't even remember much of me walking out of the room, but I remember I was very dejected. And I got home that night and again the mental chatter. Navin, what are you doing in this sales career? You're not good at it. You've only entered it because people said you're quite good at talking to people and you enjoy people, but you haven't sold a thing. You've been sacked from 2 jobs. Well, this will be your 2nd job now. Just quit. But something communicated in me that night and said, you know what? If you quit now, you will be quitting for the rest of your life. And so what I decided to do was I decided to go out and get some help because I realized that what I was doing wasn't working. Just having a good conversation wasn't enough to communicate with value and to sell. So I got myself a sales coach and I got myself another coach. And the other coach is arguably more important, or just as important, I would say. And that was a coach to work on my mindset. Because what I realized is the reason I wasn't selling, and let's take that meeting as an example, was because of a few things. I wasn't communicating with value. I wasn't communicating with confidence. I was doing all the talking. I wasn't doing any of the listening. But more than that, it was the communication that was happening inside my mind. Think about the communication I was having to myself that day when I basically messed up the sales meeting. You better get this right. you better get the sale, you haven't sold anything. Raise your hands if you think that was positive. Right, it wasn't. So what I realized, not only was my outward communication wasn't affected, so wasn't my inward communication. And that's why I took on the help of these coaches. And I'm giving you the very shortened version of the story now, but over the next few weeks, I started getting better and better. Within 8 months, I was the top salesperson in that company. And over the next decade, I built up a very good career in sales. I was always in the top 1 or 2%. But I never forgot my lesson. I never forgot my lesson that the power of selling and communicating comes from two things. Learning how to do it. It's not just good enough being able to have good conversations. Being a good conversationalist doesn't actually mean you're necessarily a great communicator, although it certainly helps. And what is the communication? What is going on in your mind? Once I got that right, things turned around. And I spent the next several years having a stellar career and then eventually starting my own business where I speak on stages communicating, where I've written books, and where I help clients. I help business owners in particular. And I help teams who need to communicate effectively actually for their living, actually to bring in revenue, to bring in income, to make an impact. And that's what I've invested my life into now because I love it. Not only how to communicate with power, but how to communicate internally with power as well. I don't know if anybody raise your hands if you've ever heard of Dilts logical levels. Gentleman over here. Fantastic. So Robert Dilts was a psychologist, I believe it was in the 1950s, and he came up with this pyramid, which effectively can be used in lots of different things, but effectively it's for success and stepping into your power. And what he said was the top of the pyramid should feed down to the bottom. Let me explain. When I was not communicating with power, when I was struggling, if you had asked me my purpose, I wouldn't have actually known it, but let's say I did come up with something, it would have been to keep my job, not get sacked. My identity would have been, I'm just a salesperson working for the XYZ company. My beliefs and values, well, I wouldn't have really believed in myself. I probably valued a lot of security. The last lady was talking about how we are actually wired more towards safety and avoiding risk. That was me, absolutely. I was wrapped up in security at that time. And my capabilities, I didn't have the power to communicate and sell effectively, so no wonder I wasn't doing well. My behaviors were on the back foot. They were timid. They were not strong, they were weak. They were full of self-doubt. And then of course the environment, well, I actually found the sales world and the business world a big, scary, ugly place. But fast forward, when, without actually knowing about this diagram at the time, but if you'd asked me even a year later, it was a very different story. And I remember my purpose being, I wanted to become the best person in that company, the best salesperson in that company. And you fast forward it to now, and now I have a completely different purpose where I want to inspire, empower, motivate, and help over 1 million people communicate with power, communicate with confidence, so they're able to not only have better lives, but better businesses. Completely changed the identity. Before I was just a salesperson to then I started seeing myself as a business owner within the company I work for. Can you see how I would communicate now? The difference between being in front of a CEO and thinking of myself as just another salesperson, little old me, versus I run my own business in this company and we're on equal level. Because what a lot of people don't realize is when you communicate, it's a lot what's going in your head. Who do you think you are? Are you in your purpose? One of my clients who actually worked as a sales professional, I don't forget because he said to me, Navin, you know what I want to be? We were trying to sum up what he actually wanted to do. And he said, what I really want to be is when I'm in a meeting, I want people to think I'm the man. I was like, what does that mean? And what he meant is he wanted them to be impressed by him. He wanted them to think that he was very intelligent, very clever, very powerful, very persuasive, all those type of things. And what I said to him, I said, the more you want them to be like that, the less they will. Because you're focusing on yourself. But when you focus on your purpose, on your mission, even if it's just in a business setting and it's just having a sales conversation, it could be getting the client to understand the value of your product or service so it helps them in their life. So it makes them run a better business or have a better personal life. When you step into your purpose, you stop worrying about yourself and you start worrying about the people that you're trying to serve and actually you become more powerful as a communicator. When you change the identity you have of yourself deep down inside, that will change how you come across. I now see myself as an entrepreneur who wants to make a huge difference. A disruptive entrepreneur, you may say. So guess what? Because I'm communicating that to myself, I live like that every day. I'm always trying to make a difference. I'm always trying to disrupt the market. I'm always trying to do something else that is going to help my clients get an edge. And that affects the way I communicate. Because I see a lot of communication books, videos, podcasts, which are fantastic, but they only focus on what's going out of your mouth. Stand in a certain way, keep eye contact in a certain way, do this, do that. Very important. I teach some of that as well. But what about what's going inside? Do you think some of the people who've done some of the greatest speeches, some of the greatest things, and led tribes, civilizations, people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Mandela, do you think that they sat there and thought, oh, let me make sure that I'm standing in a certain angle and I'm projecting my voice a certain way? Or do you think they had such a powerful purpose and identity and behavior that made that communication powerful? Who believes it was the second part that made it more powerful? Yes. Now don't get me wrong, the first part is important, but the message I want to get to you today is you need to get both. When I spoke to Maxim, we spoke about what I was going to speak about, and he said, look, okay, communication with confidence, do your thing. And over our conversation we had, I said, really for me, and what I really want to get across to everyone, it's a two-way process. So let's look a little bit about some of that outer and the speaking. So I've already spoken about speak to empower, not to impress. The moment you're trying to impress people, they smell it, and you just don't even speak with enough conviction. It's not coming from a raw source. I work with a lot of individual entrepreneurs. I work with a lot of companies. I have to say, especially in the corporate world, it is boring. And people do not speak with any kind of passion. It's all some rehearsed script. It's all numbers. It's all pie charts. That doesn't communicate value. That doesn't sell. You are not going to influence and empower anyone from just a pie chart and numbers. That helps, but you've got to speak with passion and with emotion. But there are some techniques. One of the things I talk to people when they are talking to their clients and they want them to work with them and use their services and products is ask questions. Ask intelligent, powerful questions. That day I was in front of that CEO, what did I do? I just spoke at him. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't make him think. I didn't try to understand his needs. I just spoke at him. And there are certain techniques that you can do to get better at selling and communication, because like I said, I see them as the same thing. So learn them. Because just like you learn when you go to the gym how to do a certain exercise, just like you learn how to ride a bike, just like you learn how to read, what about learning how to communicate? It's probably the most important thing you're going to do in life. It's going to help you in so many different ways. It's going to help you make more money, more business, make more impact, help more people, maybe have a better dating life. So learn how to speak with confidence, power, both on the inside and the outside. Learn the techniques. And then what about listening? This for me is a very important and underrated part of communication and sales. Because the best communicators are actually the best listeners. Be interested in others before you become interesting. I go to a lot of networking events. And it surprises me that people aren't very interested in each other. They're more interested about telling about their product or service. And then they wonder why they've got a pocket full of business cards, lots of LinkedIn and Instagram connections, and then nobody actually does any business with them. Because all they've done is gone in and pitched. They were not actually really genuinely interested in the other person. They might have learned in a book that it's good to listen and ask questions and be interested, but they're not really interested. So become interested in others to become interesting. What else when it comes to listening? It's the whole thing, when your grandmother said that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, in my case quite large ones. But honestly, use it in that proportion. Listen more than you speak. There's nothing wrong with speaking. There is times to speak. I'm speaking now on stage. But listen more than you speak, because when you listen, you understand people. When you understand people, you're a more effective communicator. And this is my thing, the most important, is listen to understand, not to respond. I want you to be really honest with yourselves. So you don't have to raise your hands or anything, but just think about this. How many times are you speaking to someone, whether it's your partner, your child, somebody in business, your friend, and while you're speaking with them, while they're speaking at you, you're actually thinking about something else, or you're thinking about the next clever answer to give? I work with entrepreneurs, and one of the things I say is that when you're speaking to a client, don't actually think about what's the next thing that's going to come out your mouth. Just listen to try to understand them, and naturally you will come out with the right thing. Believe me, because you're listening to understand. What I mean by that, when somebody's saying something, read behind those lines. What are they really trying to say? Somebody said to me the other day, I was talking to a company, a law firm, and they were like, have you worked with other law firms before? And I told them a couple. Have you worked with a law firm our size? I told them a couple. Yeah, but have you worked with a law firm with exactly our problem? What were they really saying to me? We need reassurance. They were asking these questions, but because I was listening to understand, they really need reassurance. They don't want to risk losing their money on the wrong person. So I said that to them. I said, look, I think from these questions you're asking me, there is some sort of reassurance you need. And we had a totally different conversation because I listened. They felt understood, and therefore I could influence. And finally, I know a lot of you are using things like social media. When you're posting, or not even just on social media, when you are out there communicating about your value, use these different areas. I'm rushing a bit now because I can see Maxim wanting me to leave. But these are different areas that you can do. When you are speaking about things, speak with authority, or speak about authority in a subject you have. Educate the audience, educate people. Learn how to tell a good story. Bring your personality out. And of course, social proof always helps. But really, if I wanted to leave you with a sort of conclusion to all this, it's a couple of things really. If you want to become a powerful communicator, or a powerful salesperson, because it's the same thing, then you've got to work both on the inside and the outside. You've got to learn how to speak with conviction, but that comes from when you actually genuinely are passionate about something. You've got to learn how to understand people. That genuinely happens when you really want to understand them, not because you're faking it. And you're going to speak with power when you really believe in yourself and your product and your service, or whatever situation you're in. So I hope you walked away with, you listened today and picked up a couple of things. Communication is sales. Sales is communication. Sell from the inside out. Your power from within as well as your words from without. Thank you very much.